Welcome back to This is Thailand. Today's story comes from a man named Joost, 55 years old when he landed in Bangkok, Dutch, from Rotterdam. 31 years an electrician, commercial fit-outs, industrial panel work, the kind of man who can look at a wall and tell you what's running behind it. Now, we get a lot of stories on this channel about men who came here with no idea what they were walking into. This isn't one of them. Joost had done his homework, 2 years of reading forums, a checklist in his head. He'd already been burned once, in a different country, and he came to Thailand convinced that the burn had made him bulletproof. He was, by his own admission, the smartest man in every room he walked into. He'll tell you that himself. He'll also tell you it's not a boast. What happened to Joost took just under 2 years, and it doesn't end the way you think it does. There's a construction site in Ratchada, there's a black SUV, and there's a woman standing perfectly still, unable to move, unable to speak. That's all we're going to say about that. This one's going to stick with you, not because of what she did to him, but because of what he eventually understood about himself. And I'll be honest with you, it's not a comfortable thing to hear. His name is Joost. Here's his story in his own words. I want to start with something, and I want you to hear it properly, because if you don't hear this part, then the rest of it makes no sense. I was not a fool. I need you to understand that. I know every man who tells one of these stories says that. Every one of them. But I had already done this once. I had already had my heart taken apart and handed back to me in a plastic bag, and I came to Thailand believing that made me safe. That was the mistake. Right there. Not the money. The money came later. The mistake was that. Anyway, my name is Joost. I'm from Rotterdam. Not the nice part with the cube houses and the tourists taking photographs. The south side where the cranes are. My father worked the docks. I did not want the docks. So at 17, I went into electrical, and I stayed there for 31 years. Panel boards mostly, industrial fit-outs. Toward the end, I had 2 apprentices under me. Little bastards, both of them. They called me Awe behind my back, which means old man, roughly, and they thought I couldn't hear them. I could hear them. I let it go. That's what you do. Here is the thing about being an electrician for 31 years. It rewires you, if you'll forgive me. You start to believe the world is a system. Everything has a cause. A fault does not appear from nowhere. Something loosened, something corroded, something got installed wrong in 1987 by a man who was drunk. You find it, you isolate it, you fix it, and then it's fixed. And you go home. I believed that about people too. That was my whole problem, and it took me until I was 57 to see it. So, the Philippines. I'll go quickly because it's not the story, but you can't understand me without it. I went to Cebu when I was 47. 4 years. Her name was Marilu. And I want to be very clear about this, because I know what you're expecting. She didn't steal from me. She didn't have a boyfriend on the side. There was no scam, no sick relative, none of it. She was a decent woman who was decent to me for a long time. She just stopped loving me. That's all. Slowly over about 18 months. And then one afternoon she sat down at the kitchen table and told me calmly, the way you'd tell someone the milk had gone off. She said she tried. She said she couldn't anymore. And then she helped me pack, because she's not a monster. I have never gotten over how clean it was. There was nothing to trace, no fault, no loose connection. Nothing had gone wrong. I had simply stopped being enough. And there was no wire on this earth I could tighten to change that. I flew home at 51, 2 winters in Capel. If you have never had a Dutch winter in a rented apartment with nobody in it, I'll describe it for you. Gray at 8 in the morning, gray at 4 in the afternoon, and rain that doesn't fall so much as hang there, waiting for you. I'd get up, make coffee, look at the ceiling. That was the whole day. Most days. My sister lives in Vlardingen. She'd call on Sundays. She'd say, Joost, are you eating? And I'd say yes, and that wasn't the problem. The problem was I had nothing left to fix. So I sold the house, the terrace in Rotterdam Zuid, my father's house before it was mine, took the pension buyout as well, which my accountant told me not to do, and I did anyway because I'm stubborn, and because I was 55 years old and could not see one single reason to be careful. When it was all sitting in the account, it came to about €195,000. I still check that account every Sunday morning. Habit, even now. And I thought, right, once more, but properly this time. You want to know why Thailand? Honestly, because it wasn't the Philippines. That's it. That's the whole reason, and I know exactly how stupid it sounds when I say it out loud. But I had a theory. I'd been on the forums for 2 years by then. Thai Visa, the Dutch groups on Facebook, all of it. Reading. Not posting, reading. Thousands of hours of men telling their stories, and I read them like fault reports. This one, bar girl, Nana Plaza, of course. This one sent money for 8 months to a woman he never met. This one built a house on land in his wife's name, and now the land is hers and the house is hers and he is in a hotel in Yom Tien. This one, this one, this one. And every single time I could see it. I could see exactly where the circuit failed. I could point at the paragraph and say, there. That is where you should have stopped, you idiot. So I made a list. In my head, but a real list. No bars, no Pattaya. I didn't even go. Not once. Not in 3 years. No girl with a story about her mother's hospital bill in week 1. No sick buffalo. No dead father. No sister needing school fees from a woman I'd known for 9 days. I had been vaccinated. That's how I thought about it. I had taken the illness once and survived it, and now I was immune. I want you to sit with that word for a second. Immune. I flew into Suvarnabhumi in June of 2023, 34 degrees at 11 o'clock at night, and when the doors opened, it was like walking into a wet towel. I remember standing on the taxi rank with my 2 bags, sweating through a shirt I'd bought specifically for the heat, watching a monk in orange robes queue for a taxi like everybody else, and thinking, good, good, this is different. I can work with different, and I meant it. I want to be fair to the man I was, standing there. He wasn't lonely, or he'd never have admitted it. He wasn't desperate. He'd made a plan, and he'd read the research, and he'd done the arithmetic, and by every measure he'd have used on a job site, the plan was sound. He just didn't know what he was actually building. I'll tell you about the tooth next, because that's how it started. A cracked molar and a dental clinic on Sukhumvit Soi 33, and a woman who laughed at me instead of flattering me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The tooth started hurting on the flight, actually, somewhere over Kazakhstan. But I ignored it for about 6 weeks because I'm Dutch and stubborn, and because I had other things on my mind. Let me set the scene first. One took a place in Phrom Phong. Not a fancy place. A 1-bedroom in an older building off Soi 24, 32,000 baht a month, which is about €830. 15th floor. The aircon rattled. You could hear the BTS trains going past like somebody dragging a filing cabinet across a floor every 4 minutes, all day. I loved it. I want to say that clearly, because so much of this story is people telling you Thailand ruined them, and Thailand did not ruin me. Those first months were the best I'd had in years. I had a routine. Up at 6 because the body doesn't know it's retired. Down to the street while it was still bearable, and I'd walk the same 3 soirees every morning. 24, then across to 26, then back up through the little market where the woman with the metal cart sold muping. Grilled pork on a stick, 12 baht each, sticky rice in a plastic bag. I ate that standing up on a pavement, most mornings, next to a spirit house with red Fanta and marigolds in front of it, watching the monks come past with their bowls in the gray light. I learned about 30 words of Thai. That was the deal I made with myself. 30 words minimum before I let myself talk to anybody. Sawas di krap, kup kun krap. My ow, I don't want. Very useful, that one. Tao rai, how much? Also useful, though I never once understood the answer. I'll be honest, my accent was terrible. Dutch mouths are not built for tones. I'd say something perfectly reasonable, and the woman at the market would look at me like I'd insulted her mother. And then there was the Dutch bar off of Soke. You know the type. There's one in every city on earth where Dutch people go. Orange stuff on the walls, football on the television, a menu with bitterballin on it that costs 4 times what they cost in Rotterdam. I went because I wanted to hear my own language once a week, and because a man on his own for 3 months starts talking to himself in lifts. The crowd there. Let me describe them, because they matter. There was Rude, a Belgian, 70-odd, been in Thailand since the 90s. Very quiet, drank one Leo an evening and went home. There was a Dutchman called Bram who'd lost a house in Hua Hin to a woman he'd built it for. The land in her name, of course, because it has to be, because foreigners cannot own land here. And every man in that bar knew it, and every man in that bar had watched somebody find out the hard way. And there were 4 or 5 others who were basically the same man. Divorced, 60, angry, with a story that had a woman in it and a number in it and a lesson at the end that they were extremely keen to teach you. I sat with them for maybe 2 months, and I decided quite early that they were all failures. That's the honest word. Failures. I sat there with my Chong, and I listened to them warn me about Thai women, and what I heard was men blaming an entire country for the fact that they were not lovable. I'd been through something similar, you understand. I'd come back from Cebu, and I had not turned bitter. I had gone quiet and gray and sat in Capel, but I hadn't blamed the Philippines. So I felt superior to them. There it is. That's not a nice thing to admit, but I'm not here to look nice. Anyway, the tooth, upper left molar, cracked, and by August it had gone from an ache to something that woke me at 4 in the morning. There's a dental clinic on Sukhumvit Soi 33. One of those small private places, 2nd floor, glass door, air conditioning so cold your sweat freezes on you the second you walk in. Smell of antiseptic, and underneath it, that sweet floral cleaning stuff they use everywhere in Thailand. And the assistant behind the desk was a woman called Nok. Her real name was Longer. It's always Longer. Everyone here has a nickname, and Nok means bird, which she thought was funny and I did not understand for about a year. She was 38. Isan from Khon Kaen, though I didn't know that yet. She had a laminated certificate on the wall behind her. Dental nursing, some college in Khon Kaen, her full name printed on it, and a Honda Click parked downstairs with a helmet she actually wore, which in Bangkok makes you basically a saint. Here's what happened. She asked me in English how I was feeling, and I said, because I am Dutch and this is a disease we have. Bad. Your prices are too high, but the Netherlands is worse, so I came here. Nobody says that. Not to a Thai person. You don't say it because it's rude and because it makes people lose face. And I knew that. I had read about Kringjai on the forums. I'd read the whole chapter on not being an aggressive Western clod. And Nok laughed. Not the polite laugh. The real one, from the stomach. And she put a hand over her mouth the way Thai women do. And then she said, yes, too high. But you have bad tooth, so. And she shrugged. I sat down in that waiting room and I thought, oh, 3 visits over 5 weeks, because the root canal takes what it takes. And each time I'd end up standing at her desk afterward, talking rubbish for 20 minutes while the aircon dripped. She corrected my Thai, brutally. I'd say a word and she'd say it back to me properly and make me repeat it 3, 4 times. And if I got it wrong, she'd tell me I got it wrong. She did not tell me I was clever. She did not tell me my Thai was very good, sir. Do you know how rare that is? Everybody in Bangkok tells a Farang his Thai is very good. It's a kindness, and it's also a wall. I asked her out. She said no. I want you to hear that too. She said no, and she said it pleasantly, and then she carried on being professional with me as though I hadn't asked, which was somehow worse and better at the same time. I asked again 3 weeks later, went back in for a check I didn't need, paid 800 baht for the privilege, about 20 euro, which is the most expensive way to ask a woman for coffee I've ever managed. And she said, maybe. And then 11 weeks. 11 weeks, and I paid for nothing, not one thing. She'd meet me for some time at a place on Soi 38, and she'd order and she'd pay her half, exactly her half. And when I reached for the bill, she'd put her hand flat on it and look at me until I stopped. She rode her own scooter to meet me. She had a salary, 22,000 baht a month, she told me straight out. No drama about it. She talked about a Thai boyfriend she'd had for 6 years who'd left her for someone from his village. No Farang exes, no sad mother, no brother in trouble, nothing. And I was running the numbers the whole time. I want to be clear about that because people think men like me get swept away. I wasn't swept away, I was testing. Every meeting, I was checking readings. Does the story hold? Does the money behave? Does she ask? Does she hint? Does she wait? And every single test came back clean, which is, of course, exactly what a properly installed fault looks like. You can meg the whole system and find nothing, because the thing that's going to kill you isn't a fault yet. It's just a design. But I didn't know that then. Then I went back to the Dutch bar, sat down with Ruud and Bram and the rest of them, and I told them, out loud in front of everybody, that they were bitter men who'd found bitter women, and that not everything in this country was a transaction. Ruud looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Just, what are you actually buying?" And I laughed at him. She said yes properly in October, not to coffee, to me. There's a difference, and it took her 11 weeks to make it. I remember the evening because it was raining the way it rains here in October, which is not really rain, it's a bucket. We were under the awning of a Som Tam place on Soy 38, water coming off the roof edge in a solid sheet, motorbikes going past through the flood with their riders' feet up on the handlebars, and she looked at the water and said something in Thai, and then translated it badly, and we both laughed. And then she said, "Okay, we try." That was it. That was the romance. No violins. Now. I want to spend some time on this part, because this is the part everybody skips when they tell these stories. They rush from the meeting to the disaster because the disaster is what you clicked on. But if I don't make you understand why it was good, then you'll think I was an idiot, and I want you to think something worse than that. I want you to think I was reasonable. So, why it felt different? She had no Farang in her history. None. And I checked, not in a creepy way or, all right, yes, in a slightly creepy way. I went through her Facebook back to about 2014, and it was Thai men, Thai friends, photos of her at a temple in Khon Kaen with her mother, a graduation photo with her, holding a rolled-up certificate and looking terrified. There was no album of white men with red faces. There was no gap where one had been deleted. She had a job. 22,000 baht a month at the clinic on Soy 33, about €570, which is not a lot, but it was hers. She had a scooter she paid for herself. She did not flatter me. I keep coming back to this because it was the thing. Every Thai person I met told me my Thai was very good, sir. Nok told me my Thai was terrible, and then made me say the word again. 6, 7 times. Standing on a pavement outside a 7-Eleven with a plastic bag of Leo sweating in my hand, while she made a 55-year-old Dutchman repeat the word for spicy until he got the tone right. You cannot fake irritation. That's what I thought. Flattery is easy. Irritation is expensive. And she talked about her ex. 6 years, a man from a village outside Khon Kaen. He left her for someone else, and she cried in front of me about it. Properly cried, ugly, embarrassed, wiping her face with the back of her wrist. And then she got angry at herself for crying. A woman who is working you does not show you that. That's what I told myself. I ran the audit. I want to be exact about this because it matters. No bar, no mama-san, no sick relative in month 1 or 2 or 3. No hints. Never once did she look at a price and go quiet in that way they do. When I offered money, she looked at me like I'd handed her something dirty. Every reading came back clean. Every single one. And I was so pleased with myself. Do you understand? That's the thing I have to tell you. I wasn't happy. I was correct. There is a difference, and it took me 2 years and €38,000 to learn it. So the first money. Here's how the first money happens, and it doesn't happen the way you think. She never asked. That's what I need you to hear. She never asked. I was in the place off Soy 24 with the aircon that rattled, and she was staying over 4 or 5 nights a week by then, and her scooter kept getting a 50 baht ticket from the building because she wasn't a resident. And one morning I watched her carrying her clinic uniform in a big sea bag on the BTS because she'd stayed at mine and had to go straight to work. And I thought, This is stupid. I'm a man with €195,000 in a Dutch account, and my girlfriend is carrying her uniform in a plastic bag. So I found a bigger place. 2-bedroom in a newer building over toward Ekamai. 38,000 baht a month. Call it €980. Proper aircon. Parking for the scooter. A kitchen you could actually stand up in, which mattered because she cooked, which is another thing. She cooked. Larb moo, som tam, the sticky rice in the little woven basket. She'd come back from the market on Sunday with bags hanging off both sides of the handlebars. And when I told her about the condo, she argued with me. That's true, I want it on the record. She said it was too much. She said her old room in Onnut was fine. She said, and this is the line. This is the exact line that finished me. She said, I don't want you think you buy me. I laughed at her. I said, knock, I would pay rent anyway. I live somewhere. You live somewhere. Now it's the same somewhere. It costs 6,000 baht more than I already spend. This is not a gift, it's arithmetic, which is how a Dutchman says I love you, more or less. And here's the thing about that sentence. It was true. It was completely true. 6,000 baht more a month, €150, against a Dutch pension of about 1,800 a month, plus the savings sitting there doing nothing. It was nothing. It was the correct decision on the numbers. But that's the trick. That's the whole trick. And it took me until I was 57 to see it. The first one is always arithmetic. Nobody hands you a bill for €40,000. They hand you a bill for 150, and it's a good bill, and you pay it, and now there's a wire between you. I paid the rent from then on, 12 months up front on the second year, because the landlord wanted it that way and because I had it. She kept working. She kept paying for her own petrol. She kept paying half at restaurants for another few months until it just stopped, gradually, the way these things stop, and I couldn't tell you the day it stopped, because there wasn't one. The rest of it, that first year, was good. I'm not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of the story. We went to Khon Kaen once, briefly, and I met her mother, who did not like me, properly did not like me, gave me the why, and then said about 4 words to me in 3 days. Her father sat outside on a plastic chair and smoked and said nothing to anyone, which I understood completely. He was the only person in that house I felt at ease with. I rewired the sockets in the condo because they were criminal. Thai domestic wiring is a war crime. I'm sorry, it just is. There's no earth in half of it, and the consumer units are jokes. Knock watched me do it and asked why I cared so much. And I told her, because if you do it properly, it stays done. That was the happiest I'd been since 1996. And then Rude, at the Dutch bar, sitting there with his one Leo, asked me what I was actually buying, and I laughed at him. So he said it a different way. He said, you didn't ask her what she needs. You told her what you'd give. And I said, that's the same thing, Rude. He said, no, Joost, it really isn't. I remember I was eating a bitterbal at the time. Too hot, burnt the roof of my mouth on it. Then in the spring, her father collapsed. Chapter 3. She said yes properly in October. Not to coffee, to me. There's a difference, and it took her 11 weeks to make it. I remember the evening because it was raining the way it rains here in October, which is not really rain, it's a bucket. We were under the awning of a som tam place on Soi 38, water coming off the roof edge in a solid sheet, motorbikes going past through the flood with their riders' feet up on the handlebars, and she looked at the water and said something in Thai, and then translated it badly, and we both laughed. And then she said, okay, we try. That was it. That was the romance, no violins. Now, I want to spend some time on this part, because this is the part everybody skips when they tell these stories. They rush from the meeting to the disaster, because the disaster is what you clicked on. But if I don't make you understand why it was good, then you'll think I was an idiot. And I want you to think something worse than that. I want you to think I was reasonable. So, why it felt different. She had no farang in her history. None. And I checked, not in a creepy way or, all right, yes, in a slightly creepy way. I went through her Facebook back to about 2014, and it was Thai men, Thai friends, photos of her at a temple in Khon Kaen with her mother, A graduation photo with her holding a rolled-up certificate and looking terrified. There was no album of white men with red faces. There was no gap where one had been deleted. She had a job. 22,000 baht a month at the clinic on Soy 33, about €570, which is not a lot, but it was hers. She had a scooter she paid for herself. She did not flatter me. I keep coming back to this because it was the thing. Every Thai person I met told me my Thai was very good, sir. Nok told me my Thai was terrible and then made me say the word again. 6, 7 times. Standing on a pavement outside a 7-Eleven with a plastic bag of Leo sweating in my hand, while she made a 55-year-old Dutchman repeat the word for spicy until he got the tone right. You cannot fake irritation. That's what I thought. Flattery is easy. Irritation is expensive. And she talked about her ex. 6 years, a man from a village outside Kon Kaen. He left her for someone else, and she cried in front of me about it. Properly cried, ugly, embarrassed, wiping her face with the back of her wrist. And then she got angry at herself for crying. A woman who is working, you does not show you that. That's what I told myself. I ran the audit. I want to be exact about this because it matters. No bar, no mamason, no sick relative in month 1 or 2 or 3, no hints. Never once did she look at a price and go quiet in that way they do. When I offered money, she looked at me like I'd handed her something dirty. Every reading came back clean. Every single one. And I was so pleased with myself. Do you understand? That's the thing I have to tell you. I wasn't happy and I was correct. There is a difference and it took me 2 years and €38,000 to learn it. So the first money. Here's how the first money happens. And it doesn't happen the way you think. She never asked. That's what I need you to hear. She never asked. I was in the place off Soy 24 with the aircon that rattled. And she was staying over 4 or 5 nights a week by then. And her scooter kept getting a 50 baht ticket from the building because she wasn't a resident. And one morning I watched her carrying her clinic uniform in a big C bag on the BTS because she'd stayed at mine and had to go straight to work. And I thought, this is stupid. I'm a man with €195,000 in a Dutch account, and my girlfriend is carrying her uniform in a plastic bag. So I found a bigger place. 2-bedroom in a newer building over toward Ekamai. 38,000 baht a month. Call it €980. Proper aircon. Parking for the scooter. A kitchen you could actually stand up in, which mattered because she cooked, which is another thing. She cooked. Larb moo, some tam, the sticky rice in the little woven basket. She'd come back from the market on Sunday with bags hanging off both sides of the handlebars. And when I told her about the condo, she argued with me. That's true. I want it on the record. She said it was too much. She said her old room in On Nut was fine. She said, and this is the line. This is the exact line that finished me. She said, I don't want you think you buy me. I laughed at her. I said, knock. I would pay rent anyway. I live somewhere. You live somewhere. Now it's the same somewhere. It costs 6,000 baht more than I already spend. This is not a gift, it's arithmetic, which is how a Dutchman says I love you more or less. And here's the thing about that sentence. It was true. It was completely true. 6,000 baht more a month, €150, against a Dutch pension of about 1,800 a month, plus the savings sitting there doing nothing. It was nothing. It was the correct decision on the numbers. But that's the trick. That's the whole trick. And it took me until I was 57 to see it. The first one is always arithmetic. Nobody hands you a bill for €40,000. They hand you a bill for 150, and it's a good bill, and you pay it, and now there's a wire between you. I paid the rent from then on, 12 months up front on the second year, because the landlord wanted it that way and because I had it. She kept working. She kept paying for her own petrol. She kept paying half at restaurants for another few months until it just stopped gradually the way these things stop. And I couldn't tell you the day it stopped because there wasn't one. The rest of it, that first year, was good. I'm not going to pretend otherwise for the sake of the story. We went to Kon Kaen once, briefly, and I met her mother, who did not like me, properly did not like me, gave me the why, and then said about 4 words to me in 3 days. Her father sat outside on a plastic chair and smoked, and said nothing to anyone, which I understood completely. He was the only person in that house I felt at ease with. I rewired the sockets in the condo because they were criminal. Thai domestic wiring is a war crime. I'm sorry, it just is. There's no earth in half of it, and the consumer units are jokes. Knock watched me do it and asked why I cared so much. And I told her, because if you do it properly, it stays done. That was the happiest I'd been since 1996. And then Rude, at the Dutch bar, sitting there with his one Leo, asked me what I was actually buying, and I laughed at him. So he said it a different way. He said, "You didn't ask her what she needs. You told her what you'd give." And I said, "That's the same thing, Rude." He said, "No, Eust, it really isn't." I remember I was eating a bitter ball at the time. Too hot, burnt the roof of my mouth on it. Then in the spring, her father collapsed. The call came on a Tuesday in April. I know it was a Tuesday because I was standing in the Villa Market on Soy 33, holding a packet of Dutch licorice that cost 240 baht, €6 for licorice, which tells you everything about what a man will pay for a taste of home. And my phone went, and it was Knock, and she wasn't crying. That's what I noticed. She was too calm, flat, like someone reading a number off a meter. Her father had collapsed in the yard at the house in Khon Kaen. Kidneys. Both of them essentially finished, and had been finishing for about 2 years without anybody doing anything about it. Because that's what happens when you're a rice farmer, with a government card and a horror of hospitals. We were on the overnight bus that same evening. Not the train, the bus, from Mo Chit, freezing aircon, purple LED lights in the ceiling, a film playing at full volume that nobody was watching, and Knock asleep on my shoulder with her mouth open. 8 hours. I didn't sleep. I looked out at the dark and did sums, because that's what I do when I'm frightened. Khon Kaen at 6 in the morning smells like dust and diesel and somebody's charcoal fire. Roosters everywhere. The hospital, the government one, not the private, is a long, low building with a corridor full of plastic chairs and families sitting on the floor with their bags of food, and a smell of disinfectant that doesn't quite cover what's underneath it. And there was her father. 69 years old, 45 kilos, a man who had said maybe 20 words to me in the 2 years I'd known his daughter, lying on a trolley in a corridor because there wasn't a bed yet. Now here's the thing I need you to understand, and I need you to understand it properly because everything else depends on it. This part was real. I'm not saying that to defend her. I'm saying it because it's true, and because if I let you think it was fake, then I let myself off. It wasn't fake. He had renal failure. He needed dialysis 3 times a week, and the government scheme covers a version of it, peritoneal, the kind you do at home with bags. But the machine dialysis, the hemodialysis at the hospital, that's the one the doctors wanted, and that costs 1,500 to 2,000 baht a session, and 3 sessions a week, and then the medication, and the transport, and the fistula surgery on his arm, and then a complication with the fistula and another surgery. I asked for the paperwork. I want you to know that. I did not open my wallet like a tourist. I asked for every single bill, and I photographed them, and I sat in a coffee shop near Khon Kaen University with my phone translating Thai medical invoices line by line, cross-referencing against what I could find online about hemodialysis costs at provincial hospitals. And it all checked out. To the baht. Every single figure was either correct or slightly under. Over about 6 months, it came to 240,000 baht, €6,200, near enough. I paid it. Obviously, I paid it. What am I going to do? Watch the man die in a corridor to protect my savings. But here's the part that gets me. Here's the part one still turn over at 4 in the morning. I felt magnificent. That's the word. Not generous, magnificent, useful, necessary. For the first time since I'd stopped working, since I'd handed over my tools and my van and my 2 apprentices, I was the man who fixed the thing. Somebody had a fault, and I had the means to clear it, and I cleared it, and the family looked at me differently afterwards. And her mother, who had given me 4 words in 3 days on my first visit, her mother started putting food in front of me without being asked. Sticky rice, larb, sometimes so hot it took the skin off my mouth, and she'd sit there and watch me eat it and nod. I mistook that for being loved. That's the whole thing. That is the entire fault in the circuit, and I found it 2 years too late. And while I'm being honest, The money didn't hurt. It should have, and it didn't. I want the numbers on the record because the numbers are the point. Dutch AOW plus my pension, about €1,800 a month. Savings, 195,000 minus what I'd spent on rent and living, so call it 182 by then. €6,200 is 3.5% of that. 3.5%. It's nothing. It's a new boiler. That's how they get you, and by they, I don't mean her. I mean arithmetic. Every single one of these payments, taken on its own, is affordable. That's not an accident. That's the design. So let me tell you about the eldest daughter thing, because this is where the culture comes in, and I refuse to be lazy about it. Nok is the eldest of four. Any sand that is not a birth order, it's a job description. She'd been sending money home since she was 19. From the clinic salary, $22,000 a month, she was sending 8 or 9 of it north. Her sister's school fees, her mother's blood pressure tablets, the roof. She had been doing this her entire adult life, alone before I existed, and she would have carried on doing it alone if I'd never walked into that clinic with a cracked tooth. That's not a scam. That's a woman carrying her family on her back. And I knew this. I'd read about it. I understood it. I was proud of understanding it. I'd sit in the Dutch bar and explain it to men who called it manipulation, and I'd tell them they were culturally illiterate, and I was right. But understanding a thing and being consumed by it are not opposites. That's what I didn't grasp. I thought that because I could name it, I was safe from it. Like a man who can name a live wire and therefore thinks he can hold it. There was one moment. I'll give you one moment. Second week at the hospital. Her uncle came in, some cousin of her father's, big man, gold chain, drove a Vigo, and Nok introduced me, and he did the why, and then he said something to her in Isan, and she went slightly still. And I asked her what he'd said, and she said, "He said you are a good man," which is not what he said. I could tell by how long he'd spoken. It was about 8 seconds of talking, rendered as 4 words of English. I let it go. Kreng Jai, I told myself. They don't say things directly. She's protecting me from something rude. That's the culture, Joost. You understand the culture. I think about that a lot, actually. 8 seconds. And I never asked again. By the autumn, her father was stable. Home dialysis, 4 bags a day, a nurse coming out from the district clinic once a week. The family were calling me Lung, uncle, and Nok's brother Beer had started sending me Facebook memes at 2 in the morning. And I was 56 years old, and I had never in my life felt so much like I belonged somewhere. Which is exactly when the house came up. The house came up in November. Nok's mother mentioned it first, not Nok. And I want to be precise about that, because the sequence matters. The mother said it in Isan at the table, and Nok translated it for me with a face that said she didn't want to be translating it. The house had a problem. It had always had a problem. Concrete piers, timber above, corrugated roof, and the timber had gone soft at the back where the rain came in for 20 years. The floor sagged. There was a hole in the kitchen you could put your foot through, and they had put a plastic crate over it. And now there was a man in the house who needed dialysis 4 times a day, in a room where you could smell the damp. 780,000 baht for the whole thing. New roof, new back wall, proper concrete floor, a bathroom that wasn't a hole in a bucket. €20,000, near enough. I said yes in about 4 seconds. Not because I was manipulated, because I'd seen the hole in the kitchen floor. And now I'm going to tell you the thing that should have stopped me, and I want you to notice how well I explained it away, because you'll do the same. Everybody does the same. I wanted to do the electrics. That house had wiring from about 1988. Twin and earth with no earth, obviously just twin, running along the outside of the beams and stapled with actual staples, and a fuse box with a 15 amp rewirable in it that somebody had bridged with what I am fairly sure was a nail. It was a fire waiting for an excuse. And I was a man with 31 years of commercial and industrial experience. And I was excited, properly excited, the first proper excitement I'd felt about work since Rotterdam. I costed it out. I priced a consumer unit in Konkane. I made a drawing on a napkin at a coffee shop. And Nok said no, kindly, warmly. She said the family would be embarrassed. She said the men in the village do this work, and if the Farang does it, they lose face. And her uncle knows a man, and it's fine. Lung, it's fine. Face, Kreng Jai. All the words I'd learned on the forms handed straight back to me, and I sat there with my napkin drawing, and I folded it up and put it in my pocket and said, okay. I still have that napkin, actually. That's a stupid detail, but it's true. It's in a drawer. So the money went, not to a contractor, to Knock, who gave it to her uncle, who gave it to the man he knew. Cash, in stages. 200, then 300, then the rest. I never saw an invoice for a single baht of it, and I, a man who photographed and translated every hospital bill down to the paracetamol, I never asked for one. Why not? Because asking would have been an insult. Because I was lung by then, uncle, family, and family doesn't audit family. Because I'd spent 2 years telling the men at the Dutch bar that Western suspicion is a disease, and now I'd have had to catch it in front of witnesses. That's not culture. That's vanity. I'd like to be very clear that it was vanity. Then in February, Beer needed a truck. Beer's the brother. 29, a good kid, honestly, sends memes at 2 in the morning, works in and out of the fields and the ice factory and whatever else there is. And the family had a plan. They were going to run vegetables from the village into the market in Khon Kaen, and for that you need a pickup, and a decent second-hand Isuzu D-Max is 310,000 baht, 8,000 euro. There was a business case. There was actually a business case drawn out for me on a piece of paper with the number of crates and the price per crate and the fuel, and I sat and went through it, and it was fine. It was optimistic, but it was fine. I paid. Running total, if you're keeping score, and you should be, because I wasn't, rent on the condo, about 12,000 euro over that period. Father's treatment, 6,200. The house, 20,000. The truck, 8,000. Call it 38,000 euro. Out of 195. 20% of everything I had in the world. And here's what I want you to understand. And this is the whole point of this chapter. At no time did I feel that I was spending 20% of everything I had. I felt like a man who had made 4 separate, sensible, individually affordable decisions, each one for a good reason. I never added them up. Not once. Not until the following August, sitting in a hotel room with the curtains shut, an electrician who never added up the load. 31 years I've been telling apprentices, you don't size a cable for one appliance, you size it for the total. You add up everything on the circuit, and I sat there and paid and paid and paid, and I never once totaled the load. Now, the other things. The house was finished in the spring. I never saw it, not once. There was always a reason, and each reason was reasonable. It's not finished. It's finished, but it's messy. Your visa run is next week. My mother is stressed. And then, eventually, when I pushed, and I did push a bit, she said, it make me shame, Lung. Poor house, not for you. Shame. Face. And I thought, yes, of course. Village pride. She doesn't want the Dutchman inspecting the concrete he paid for like a landlord. That's what I told myself. That is genuinely what I told myself, and I want you to sit with how good that explanation was, because it was a very good explanation. It was culturally literate. It was empathetic. And it was completely, totally wrong. The phone went face down, every time. On the table, in the bed, on the counter, face down, always. But everybody's phone is face down. Mine's face down. That's nothing. And she started doing weekend shifts. Saturdays first, then Saturdays and Sundays. Extra money, she said. Another clinic, a private one out in Rachata. I drove past that clinic once, in a Grab, on the way to somewhere else, on a Sunday afternoon. It was shut. Metal shutter down, no lights, a delivery bike parked across the entrance like it had been there for hours. And I want you to know exactly what I did with that information. I did not confront her. I did not ask her. I sat in the back of that Grab with the aircon blowing on my face, in the driver's Buddhist charms swinging off the mirror, and I constructed, within about 90 seconds, an explanation. Different clinic, same road, different building, or a side entrance round the back, or the shutters for security and the staff go in through the car park. Bangkok's a big place. I'd have got the SOI wrong easily. 90 seconds. That's how long it took me to talk myself out of the only piece of hard evidence I ever had. Because here's what I'd have had to accept otherwise. Not that she was lying. I could survive her lying. What I'd have had to accept was that I was 57 years old and I had done it again, and that the whole architecture, the audit, the forums, the checklist, the 2 years of superiority at the Dutch bar, all of it was a man building a very sophisticated cage and then walking into it and pulling the door shut behind him. I wasn't ready to be that man, so I said nothing. And in June, she brought up the sin sod, 1 million baht, 26,000 euro, plus gold, 5 baht weight at least. Her mother wanted 7. And for the first time in 2 years, I heard something hum. Songkran, April 2025. I want to describe it properly because for about 4 hours, it was the happiest day of my life, and I think you should have that before I take it away. The village outside Khon Kaen, the road down the middle, everybody out. Kids with those plastic water cannons that cost 60 baht at the market and break in 2 days. Pickup trucks going past at walking pace with a plastic barrel of ice water in the back and 8 people in it, all of them soaked. Somebody's speaker playing Morlem so loud the sound came apart. The old people sitting under the eaves with the white chalk paste on their faces, laughing at everyone else. And it's 40 degrees, and the water is genuinely cold, and there's a smell of wet dust and grilled chicken and two-stroke smoke, and I'm standing in the middle of it, 6'2", red as a post box, in a shirt with flowers on it that Knock bought me and I hated. And her mother poured water over my hands and I did the why, and she said something and everyone laughed. I was family, that was the word in my head. Family. Beer got drunk about 3 in the afternoon, hong thong and coke, and ice in a red plastic bucket, which is what they drink, and he'd been at it since 11. He's a good kid. I want to say that. 29, sends me memes, drives the truck I bought, drove, and he came and sat next to me on the concrete step and put his arm around my shoulders. And he was crying, not sad crying, that drunk, awful, guilty crying. And he said in his terrible English, and it took him about 4 goes to get it out, "Lung, you good man, I sorry. My family, not good to you." And I said, "Beer, what are you talking about?" And he told me, 8 months. 8 months there'd been another man, Kunanan, from Bangkok, Thai Chinese, property developer, mid-50s, and he'd met the family. Met them, sat at that table, eaten out of those bowls, and the family were negotiating with him. The sin sod was for him, not from me, for him. The weekend shifts. That's where the weekend shifts had gone. And Beer kept saying sorry over and over and holding my arm, and I remember I said quite calmly, "Beer, let go of my arm." Then I stood up and I walked out of the party. I walked about 100 meters down that road with water still coming off my shirt and kids screaming, and a truck going past with a barrel in the back, and I sat down on the front steps of the house I paid for. New concrete, still that raw gray color, new roof, blue steel sheet, the kind everyone uses. And through the doorway, on the wall, I could see the consumer unit, and it was rubbish. It was absolute rubbish. Some village bodge with the cover hanging off and the neutral bar overloaded. And I looked at it and I thought, I could have done that in a day. I offered to do that in a day. That's what I thought about. Not the money, not the woman, the consumer unit. I sat there for about 40 minutes. Knock came out. She stood in the doorway, and she didn't come down the steps, and she didn't say anything. And I didn't turn round, and after a while I said, and I've thought about this sentence a lot, because it's the stupidest thing I've ever said, and it's also the truest. I said, "Is he a good man?" And she said, "Yes." And then she cried. I want to be very careful here, because this is the part that everybody in the comments will get wrong. She did not deny it. She did not grovel. She did not tell me it was a misunderstanding, or that he was her cousin, or any of the nonsense you're expecting. She stood there on those steps and she cried, and I have thought about that crying every week for a year. And here's the thing that has ruined me. I believed it. I still believe it. That's the problem. She sat down on the step, not next to me, one step above, which I noticed, because I noticed things like that. And she talked for about 20 minutes in a mixture of English and Thai, and I understood maybe 70%, and I've filled in the rest since. She said, my father need dialysis until he die, maybe 10 year. She said, my sister wants study nursing, my mother diabetes. Beer has truck, but no work. She said, you are good man, Lung. You pay everything, you never say no. But your money is, and she used the word finish. Your money is finished one day. Then what? And she said the thing I've written on a piece of paper and stuck inside my toolbox, which is a ridiculous thing for a 58-year-old man to do. She said, I cannot be the daughter I have to be with your money. That's it. That's the whole story. Not I don't love you, not you were a fool, just the load is too big for the cable used, and she'd known it before I did because she'd been carrying the load her whole life and she knew exactly what it weighed. And I'd been so busy admiring my own understanding of Thai family obligation that I'd never once done the sum. A non can pay for 10 years of dialysis and not notice. I can pay for 2, maybe 3, and then I'm a 60-year-old Dutchman with no house in Rotterdam and no savings and a family looking at me the way you look at a battery that's gone flat. She wasn't wrong. That's what I can't get past. She wasn't wrong. And I looked for the lie. God, I looked for it. 31 years I've traced faults. You go back along the circuit methodically, and you find the point where it fails. I went all the way back. The clinic, the 11 weeks she paid her own way, the tooth, the condo she argued with me about, the way she made me repeat the word until I said it right. There isn't one. There is no lie in it anywhere. She told me from the beginning what she needed, every single time. She told me with the hospital, and she told me with the house, and she told me with the truck. And I heard a woman who needed rescuing, because that was the story I wanted to be in. I did that. Me, she let me, and she took it. And she should have said no somewhere around the truck. And that's on her. I'm not a saint about it. There's a part of me that hopes his mother is worse than hers. And I know how petty that is, and I don't care. But the fault was in my wiring, not hers. I asked one question. I said, did you ever? And she looked at me and said, in the beginning, yes. And you know what? I believe that too. I got the bus back to Bangkok the next morning, on my own. 8 hours, same route, purple LEDs, some film playing at full volume, 38,000 euro, 23 months, 58 years old. And the worst of it, the actual worst of it, worse than any of the money, was sitting on that bus knowing that when I got back to Bangkok, I was going to have to walk into that Dutch bar off a soak and sit down opposite Ruud, who has one Leo a night and never said a word against her, and be exactly, precisely to the last decimal place the man I told him he was. 3 weeks in a hotel on Soy 11. Curtains shut, aircon on 18 because I wanted to be cold. I'm not going to dress it up. I ate from the 7-Eleven downstairs, those toasted ham and cheese things they put in the microwave, the ones that come out the temperature of the sun in the middle and frozen at the corners. And I drank Leo from the fridge and I watched Dutch football on my laptop with the sound off. I booked a flight to Amsterdam twice, canceled it twice. Both times I got as far as the payment page, and then I thought about landing at Schiphol in April, and my sister waiting with the car, and the first question she'd ask, and I closed the laptop. I did phone her in the end, my sister in Vlaardingen, and I got about 4 words in. Marja, it's finished. And then I heard myself, and I could hear exactly what I sounded like. I sounded like every man at that Dutch bar, every single one of them, 60 years old, blaming a country. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't become that. So I did the only other thing I could think of, which was to look at what I actually was. Not a man in a condo waiting for love, a man with 31 years of commercial and industrial electrical experience, sitting in a city that is building 30 towers at once. You cannot walk 200 meters in Bangkok without hearing a hammer drill. The whole place is scaffolding and green netting and men in flip-flops standing on the 15th floor. I put a clean shirt on and I went and knocked on the door of an M&E subcontractor in Ratchada. Just walked in. No work permit, no plan, no tie. And the man there looked at me like I'd come to read the meter. But I had photographs on my phone, panel boards, distribution boards from the port, 31 years of them, because I photographed my work, because everybody in this trade photographs their work. He gave me a consulting arrangement, 6 months advising, then he gave me more. And I want to be exact about the next part, because this is the useful bit, and the rest of this story is just a man being an idiot. I set up a Thai company, properly. 2 Thai partners, 49% me, which is the law, and there is no way around it that doesn't end with you being the story on somebody else's YouTube channel. I hired my own lawyer, mine. Not one the partners suggested, not one a friend of a friend recommended. I found a firm on Sathorn. I paid them. I read what they gave me, and when I didn't understand something, I made them explain it again like I was stupid, because in that room I was. My name goes on every contract, every bank mandate, every invoice. 2 signatures, always, and one of them is mine. Audited accounts, actual ones. And I did 3 months of due diligence on my partner before a single bot moved. 3 months. I went and looked at his previous jobs. I talked to a man who'd fallen out with him. I checked the company registry. 3 months of due diligence on a business partner. And do you know how long I did on Knock? 11 weeks. And I spent all 11 weeks checking whether she was going to ask me for money, which was the wrong question. The right question, the one Rude asked me and I laughed at, was, what does this woman actually need, and can I actually provide it, and forever? 2 years later, I've got 14 people. We do electrical fit-out on condominium towers. It's not a fortune, and I work harder now than I did at 40, and I love it in a way I'm slightly embarrassed about. I bought a Fortuner, black. Not because I wanted one. I hate the thing, it's the size of a barge. But because in this country, a client who sees you get out of a Toyota Yaris does the sum in his head, and it costs you the job. So it's a tool. It's a very stupid, very effective tool. And in September of last year, we topped out a building in Rachata, 28 floors. We'd done the whole thing, risers, panels, all of it. And there's a ceremony, monks, the flowers, the whole business, and everyone's in a white shirt in 40-degree heat pretending they're not dying. I pulled up at the site, got out, and she was standing about 12 meters away next to a man in his 50s in a very good shirt, because he was one of the developers on the project. Of course he was. Bangkok is enormous, and it is also extremely small. Knock. And she stopped. That's the only way I can describe it. She just stopped. Mid-step, mid-sentence. Whatever she was doing, she stopped. And she looked at me and she didn't move. And I would put money on the fact that she had absolutely no idea what to do with her face. And I'll tell you what I felt. Because it wasn't triumph. I thought it would be. I thought about that moment for a year. I rehearsed it in the shower, like a teenager. And when it actually happened, what I felt was mostly just tired and a bit sorry for her, which she would hate. I nodded, the way you'd nod at anyone. And I walked past her into a building I had wired to do my job. That's it. That's the whole revenge. It's not much of a story, is it? She's married now, I think. I hope her father's alive. I hope Beer's still got the truck. So, what do I tell you? 38,000 euro, 23 months. And the thing it bought me, because it did buy me something, is this. I came to Thailand to be loved. And a man who comes to be loved will pay any invoice you put in front of him, because he isn't buying a house or a truck or a kidney machine. He's buying evidence. Evidence that he's necessary. And there is no ceiling on what a man will pay for that, which is why the money always runs out before the need does. I never got scammed. I want that on the record. Nobody lied to me. She told me exactly what she needed from the first week, and I heard something else because I wanted to hear something else. The fault wasn't in her wiring, it was in mine. So I stopped coming here to be loved, and I came here to work. And the work has never once lied to me. You cannot flatter a distribution board. It either holds the load or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, that's your fault, and you fix it. Add up the load. That's all I've got. Not the payment in front of you. The total. Everything on the circuit, for as long as it'll be drawing. If it's more than you've got, you're not a bad man for saying so. You're just an honest one. That was Used. 58 now, still in Bangkok. Still working. And I want to be careful with what we take from this, because it would be very easy to watch this and come away thinking Knock was a monster. She wasn't. There's no villain in this story, and that's precisely what makes it worth your 40 minutes. She was the eldest daughter of a family with a dying father, A diabetic mother, a sister who wanted an education, and a brother who couldn't find work. She did the arithmetic that Youst refused to do, and she reached a conclusion he couldn't argue with. Because when he finally sat down and did the sum himself, he got the same answer. That is not a con. That's a woman choosing her family over a man, which is a choice people make in every country on earth, every single day, and we usually call it duty. What she took from him was 38,000 euro. What she gave him, accidentally, expensively, was the education he'd refused to accept for free from a Belgian with one beer at a bar off a Soki. And here's the part that should keep you up tonight, if you're the sort of man this channel is for. Youst was not naive. He was the opposite. He'd been burned once, he'd read the forms for 2 years, he had a checklist, and he ran it. The men who lose everything here are almost never the wide-eyed ones. They're the ones who are certain, absolutely certain, that they're too clever to be fooled. Certainty is the loose connection. It's always the loose connection. So before you send the next transfer, ask his question. Not, can I afford this one? Ask, what is the total load on this circuit, and how long will it draw? And if the honest answer is more than you have, say so. Out loud, early. It'll cost you a relationship. It'll save you the rest of your life. Thanks for being with us. Take care of yourselves out there. This is Thailand.